Hello, welcome to the You and You podcast with me, Sanjiv. In every episode, we look at a new word and how it shaped my life and how I worked with it and through it, and hope to give you some top tips on how to move through an issue you may be facing. This episode's words are anticipatory grief. Recently, the concerns and fears that girls have expressed in workshops have changed significantly from when I first started role modelling 7 years ago. The concerns have become more adult and intense, and I think that the world has changed, especially with COVID. I volunteer in London in deprived areas, and during COVID, these girls may have lived in cramped housing conditions with little external space. They may have had to look after their younger siblings while their parents were out working as key workers. I was surprised to hear an 11-year-old saying that she was going to go home and look after her cousin. And then to add to this, the additional pressure of the cost of living crisis, which is prevalent in the whole world, I think, at the moment. In one particular school, one of the first things that came up was the fear of somebody dying who was close to you. And on top of that, what would happen to the financial stability of the home. We were surprised to hear this, as it wasn't a typical fear we had heard before, and these girls were about 13 to 14-year-olds. So have you experienced this fear, the fear of somebody close to you passing away? Well, I have quite a lot of experience with this subject matter. And when I started to research it, there was a name for it, which really wowed me because I just thought it was me, and that's how I used to feel. The name is anticipatory grief. You must have heard of the circle of life. We are born, we take our first breath, we grow, we carry on breathing until we stop breathing, and then we die. In order for there to be life, there must be death. We are natural beings, even though we can feel very disjointed from that. It sounds simple. And then after death, well, that will depend on your spiritual and personal views, and that's not something that I'm going to go into. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes and told me he was going to die. And whilst I was young, I really didn't know what this meant, except that he wasn't going to be around anymore. I was his little sidekick. He brought me up. He was my main carer, and he looked after me. And I was known to be a difficult child. I didn't like being looked after by other people in their homes. So, for example, my gran, who I absolutely loved and adored, it was fine for her to come and look after me in our house, but I didn't like going to stay at hers because I used to get so homesick. It was crazy. I was okay to go and stay with her if I had another sibling there. That level of homesick is quite interesting in itself. So my dad worked later shifts in the day to accommodate for that, and when he couldn't, my gran would come and look after me in our home. So my dad to me was the world. And it wasn't like he was sitting there playing with me. It was very functional. I just got on with my own whatever. I don't know, I just did my own thing as whatever a 2 or 3-year-old can do. If he needed to do an errand, he'd just pick me up and take me with him. Death was a constant talking point in our home. Both parents were unwell, and my mum started to get quite unwell with asthma. It became quite fierce at a certain point. And then she started having anaphylactic shocks, which nobody knew about at that time. I was taught by a doctor between the ages of about 9 and 11 of how to put together a typical syringe, not like your adrenaline shots. Adrenaline could only at that time be given by the doctors. In that learning, it was also about how to inject her and the consequences of not putting it together correctly. That injection would extend her life span for a few more minutes to be able to get her into A&E if required. But thankfully, it wasn't required of me. As a child, I was carefree. I was happy. I loved being outside, playing with my friends, making things, playing sports, just having fun. Within that, though, there were moments and waves of loss, grief, and fear. for the future. I really didn't know what to do with it or what it was. I concealed it. I pushed it down. For me, it was associated with shame, and I saw it as a weakness for sure. And when you're brought up in an environment with so many strong personalities, weakness was not where I was going to be. Absolutely no way, especially as the youngest. I was a hypervigilant child, which made me who I am. But it meant that I suppressed a lot of things as well, and I didn't know how to express myself. So what is grief? Well, it's a natural emotion that helps you come to terms with the end of something. And that can be someone passing away, the end of a situation, the end of a relationship. It can take a while to process, sometimes months, sometimes weeks, sometimes, in worst case scenarios, years for people to come to terms with a loss. There are 5 significant stages of grief, which are commonly talked about: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I would also say these come into play at the end of lots of different types of relationships, whether that is friendships and romantic entanglements. Entanglements, that's a fun word, isn't it, to use with relationships? As relationships, friendships, everything, none of them, they're not straightforward. And maybe that's where the light comes in, and that's where the learning happens. Maybe that is the actual beauty of relationships, because they all help you to grow in some sort of way. I have definitely grieved at the end of somebody's life ending, friendships, and also relationships. I've been really careful recently about who I'm holding close to me. And that's because I've been going through lots of transition and things have been changing for me. I've allowed myself to get into a new relationship, which just ended, and that's okay. It means I can write this knowing how grief feels from a very fresh perspective. And I also know I will get through this. I have gratitude and so much love for the experience, but I'm also appreciate the end of it. And I realize that it wasn't the best situation for me or him. I definitely feel a loss of somebody who I talked to, who was my confidant, a friend, but I feel lighter. And I can only wish them the best. And I'm very grateful that I will not leave it as long again to get myself into a relationship. And that excites me. Grief, though, can leave us feeling very stuck and stagnant. But I believe that there is growth in the stagnancy. Being still is not a bad thing. We are never stuck. We are forever evolving. Grief can also be impacted by your age and your belief systems. You may experience some of the following: numbness or disbelief, guilt, sadness, anger at yourself or the person who is dying, anxiety or fear about the future, relief, mood swings. It's all natural. It's all part of the process. Recently, I've had this about my mum, as she's been unwell, and there have been big changes for her, big changes in her life. And that means that there's been changes in our relationship too. I've experienced the loss of our old relationship and what that means for her. And also, I have fear for her future as well. These are key changes in our family system and how things have previously been. I've taken my mum away a couple of times in the past and had some nice little holidays with her, and I wish I'd taken her away more. But I'm happy though, because I know that we both cherish those trips, and we have another one planned soon. You know, I've spent a lot of time with my mum though. We have fun. I annoy her sometimes, but I think that's all right. Have you experienced a time when you may think, or there is an impending loss of a loved one? Experiencing anticipatory grief doesn't mean you will not grieve after the loss, as it is not talked about and very individual and a private thing. There can be a lot of shame associated with it. Like, why am I feeling this? Everybody seems fine, or, you know, they're unwell, but nobody's saying this and nobody's feeling this. Don't worry about it. You're not wishing them to be dead. What I'm saying is, Anticipatory grief is natural, and it's okay to experience this, and you're not alone. It's more common than you think. There's no right or wrong in this, and sometimes it helps people to process what is going on before the end of the relationship. What can you do if you feel like this? I would say talk to somebody, even if it's not a family member. Seeking help is not a weakness. It shows strength and understanding of yourself and your needs. And your needs are important within this. Be kind to yourself. Top tip, be kind to yourself. Talk to yourself kindly. Most people will understand anticipatory grief. I mentioned that I was doing this podcast on this subject matter to a few random strangers, and they were like, oh my God, I am so there. I know. So, people immediately got it. If you are feeling low and having anxiety, go and talk to your doctor. Ask them for a referral to a therapist. You're not alone in asking for help. You have to look after yourself, nurture yourself with good food and exercise. Maybe meditate. Meditate's a great tool. Journaling is a good way to process your feelings and emotions. Physically writing down how you are feeling with your hand slows down that thought process to be able to sit in it for a bit. There are ways to journal, and I'll go through that later point. Sleep hygiene is cool. It's good to have it. It allows you to process things naturally, and it gives you strength for the next day. Returning to my story, when I had anticipatory grief about either one of my parents in my teenage years, depending on what was happening to either one of them, I was thinking about all the things that could happen and how much I would miss them. And there was so much worry there, so much stress. My father was around in the end till my mid-20s, and my mum's still here. And I'm so glad for all the memories and how much they're part of me, and the fact that I'm still making them with my mum. I think it's great. I think it's really important that you enjoy the moment rather than focusing too much on what might be. No one could determine my parents' lifespan, including themselves, thankfully. It's really nourishing to create positive memories. I will put a warning out there. Don't force all your family members to get involved. They might not want to do it. So, because everybody has their own thing going on. Anyone you involve must want to be there, with a light heart and a happiness to be there. Acceptance of other people's needs is key. Find joy in the moment and go and give them a hug. Just be there with them. If you need to speak to somebody, please access your local health services. You may find additional information on your school and university's websites around well-being and mental health, and there'll be charities within your area as well that you can. I would like to do some bonus episodes with some Q&As, so please send your questions through. You can Instagram me through direct message on Sanjiv Sangha, or you can email me at hello@sanjivsangha.com. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to listen to more, and thank you for listening. Have a top-tastic day. Yay!